My name's Peyton. I'm 31 years old, living in Austin, Texas, and I once believed I was about to enter the perfect marriage with the ideal man. Brendan, fiancé, is 2 years older than me, a civil engineer, quiet but always thoughtful. We met at a seminar 3 years ago, and during our very first conversation I thought, this man is nothing like the ones I've known. He knew how to listen, was just smart enough, spoke honestly when needed, and had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in a crowded room. We got engaged at the end of last fall when leaves began to fall along the lake trail where he knelt down. No extravagance, no $1 million ring, just Brandon, with sincere eyes and the question that stopped my heart. Peyton, will you grow old with me? I cried out of joy, and I believed that promise the way a child clutches a ticket to the future. After getting engaged, we quickly dove into planning a spring wedding. Everything felt like it was moving smoothly. The guest list, the venue at a quiet ranch just outside the city, the cake tastings, and those small but sweet arguments about the bouquet colors. Brandon was the first man who made the word stability feel safe rather than suffocating. So when he said he wanted to go back to California for a few weeks to visit his mom, who was recovering from a minor surgery, I didn't suspect a thing. Brandon's always been family-oriented, and it had been nearly a year since he'd returned to the small beach town where he grew up. I even helped him pack, slipped in a few packets of his favorite coffee, and called out as he walked to the car, "Tell your mom I said hi, I'll miss you." Brandon turned back, gave a soft smile, and said, "I'll call every night. Don't overthink it, it's just a few weeks." A few weeks. Sounds simple, right? I sent him off with a long kiss and a hug tight enough to hold on to that sense of closeness. I had no idea that hug would be the last time I felt certain about the man I was about to marry. At first, just like he promised, Brandon called every night. We talked about his mom, the pleasant West Coast weather, and even discussed putting a deposit down for our wedding photo studio. He sounded tired but still kept his voice steady, warm, and attentive. I thought, he's just homesick. He probably misses me as much as I miss him. But on the 5th day, my call rang once and then stopped. The messages I sent via iMessage no longer showed as read. I told myself maybe he was tired, busy, or forgot to charge his phone. Anything was possible. On the 6th day, I received a single message. "Peyton, I need some time to think. I'll explain later." I went numb. Think? About what? About us? About the wedding we'd spent the whole winter planning? About the vows he had handwritten and tucked inside the ring box? I texted back almost immediately. "Brandon, what's going on? Can you please tell me clearly?" No reply. The silence hit like a punch to the chest. No warning. I'm not someone who panics easily, but in that moment, I was scared. Not because I feared being abandoned, but because I didn't know what I was being treated as. A man about to get married, leaving only 2 lines behind and disappearing? I stared at my phone screen, then looked at the calendar on the wall, our wedding date circled in bright red, and I started to understand. Something was breaking. 3 days had passed since Brandon's last message. Every morning I grabbed my phone by instinct. Nothing. No explanation, no apology, not even a meaningless emoji. At first I tried to stay calm. Maybe his phone was broken, maybe he was caring for his mom and too busy to check in. I acted composed, worked, drank chamomile tea, played my favorite playlist. But everything felt fake. Even the birds chirping outside irritated me, as if nothing wrong was happening. I sent more messages. "Are you okay? Just let me know you're safe." I don't need a long explanation, just a sign. But still nothing. The messages remained stuck at sent, never moving to read. On the 4th day, I tried FaceTiming him. The screen rang for a few seconds, then went to voicemail. I called again, then again, straight to voicemail. I felt a chill settle into my chest, not from the air conditioning, but from the thick silence Brandon was laying between us. This wasn't him. Brandon wasn't the kind of man who vanished without a word. He hated ambiguity. That was one of the things I loved about him. His clarity, his directness, how he always addressed misunderstandings before they had a chance to grow. So why was he hiding now? I scrolled through social media, checked his Facebook profile, where he normally posted photos of the little garden behind his house, or the neighbor's dog visiting, Nothing new for a whole week. Same with Instagram, completely blank. I checked his story section. Nothing, no signs, no post saying taking a break or disconnecting for a while. The unease inside me kept growing. I've never been good with prolonged silence, especially not when it comes from someone who once promised to stay. That night I called Brandon's sister, Emily. We'd met a few times before, not close, but close enough to send each other holiday greetings. The phone rang for a long time. When she picked up, I realized my voice was shaking. Emily, it's Peyton. I'm sorry to call this late. I just wanted to ask, is Brandon doing okay? Silence. Then a slow reply came, soft as cotton but cold enough to cut through me. Brandon told you he was visiting Mom? I froze. Yes, wait. He's not staying with Miss Margot? Another pause. I could hear wind or maybe traffic on the other end. Finally she said, I'm not really sure, we haven't talked much lately. Her voice was evasive, unnatural. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I just want to know he's okay. He hasn't answered my messages. Everything happened so suddenly, I said softly, trying to stay calm. Peyton, I think he probably just needs some time. Sometimes people need quiet to think. Think about what? I asked, almost whispering. We're planning a wedding. I don't understand what's going on. Emily hesitated. Then she said one final thing before ending the call. Maybe you should let him reach out. If he hasn't called back, maybe he's not ready yet. The line went dead. I stayed seated at the kitchen stool, not realizing until that moment that my fists were clenched so tightly, my nails had left marks in my palms. I knew something was being hidden. A man who's about to get married doesn't need quiet so badly that he disappears. And if he really does, the least he could do is say it clearly and respectfully. But Brandon didn't say anything. He chose to withdraw and left me drowning in a storm of unanswered questions. That silence, scarier than any goodbye. I stayed awake on the 10th night since Brandon vanished from my life like he'd never existed. Sleep had become a luxury, while the anxiety pressed in so hard I could hear my own heartbeat as dawn crept in. I had waited for him to come back. Given him space, didn't push, didn't blame. But his silence no longer felt like time to think. It felt like a quiet rejection. And even though I didn't want to admit it, I knew it. That morning I stood by the kitchen window, a cold cup of coffee in my hand, staring at the shadows cast by the trees across the yard. I let out a sigh. Then, as if something clicked inside me, I put the mug down, walked into the closet, and pulled a small suitcase from the back corner. I wasn't going to sit back and let someone else dictate my emotions. If Brandon didn't have the courage to tell the truth, I'd go find it myself. He once told me his mother's house was in Monterey, California, a small coastal town with windy hills and towering pines. I'd seen photos of it on his phone, a white lighthouse, a tiny roadside bakery, and a dirt path leading to the lavender farm he loved. The drive took nearly 6 hours through the winding roads of Central California. I barely stopped, just once to get gas and grab a bottle of water. In my head, 100 scenarios played out. Maybe he really was caring for his mom. Maybe he was going through something painful he couldn't explain, but deep down I feared I already knew. I just hadn't faced it yet. When I pulled up in front of the white house with weathered roof tiles, the one Brandon said he grew up in, my heart pounded so hard I couldn't breathe. I sat still in the car for nearly 5 minutes, trying to collect myself. Then I walked up and gently knocked on the wooden door, its paint peeling with age. The door opened after a few seconds. And there he was, Brandon, standing in front of me. He wore a gray t-shirt and simple shorts, his hair slightly tousled, his eyes wide like he'd just seen a ghost in broad daylight. Peyton? He stammered. What are you doing here? I kept my voice steady. I think you owe me an explanation. Brandon hesitated, then stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in. The house was humble, cozy. The faint smell of cookies hung in the air, and somehow that hit me harder than anything else. We sat down in the living room. No one spoke for a few seconds. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the faint sound of waves in the distance filled the space. I broke the silence first. You disappeared without a word. Brandon, what were you doing? He looked down at his hands, rubbing the palm of his left hand, a nervous habit of his. Then he looked up, voice hoarse. I'm sorry, I didn't think you'd come all the way here. Exactly, because you didn't think I had to come, I replied, not angry, just too exhausted to keep guessing. Brandon stared at me for a long time. Then finally he said what I had feared and suspected all along. When I got back here, I ran into Zoe. I froze. Zoe? I repeated. Your ex? He nodded, eyes drifting away. I didn't seek her out, it just happened. At the used bookstore near the harbor. We talked, and then kept talking. She used to be an important part of my life. I swallowed hard, my heart thudding in my chest. And that made you forget me completely? No, it's not like that. He leaned forward, eyes pleading. I was just confused. I didn't want to enter a marriage with doubts. Doubts about what? My voice cracked. We were engaged. We booked the venue, chose the menu, mailed out the invitations. And just because you ran into your ex, you decided to cut all contact with me? I didn't mean to, Brandon said softly. I just needed time to be sure. I let out a short laugh. Be sure about what, Brandon? Whether I was worth giving up your past for? Or if I still held up as the better option after your little nostalgia trip? He didn't say a word. And I no longer needed him to. I left the house in Monterey right after that conversation. No anger, no tears, no drama. I didn't hesitate. I took my bag and spoke just one line. I think you've had enough time to be uncertain. Now it's my turn to be sure. I no longer belong in your picture. Brandon didn't stop me. He just sat there, eyes fixed on the old wooden floor, saying nothing. And that silence, to me, was the cruelest goodbye. The drive back to Austin felt twice as long. I don't even remember how I made it home. All I know is that at every rest stop, every gas station, one question haunted me. What did I do wrong? But as the Texas sky appeared through my windshield, I knew. I wasn't wrong. I just loved the wrong person. For 3 days after that, Brandon didn't message me. No calls, no explanations. As if everything that happened was just a dream, and he owed nothing to the woman he once gave a ring. On the 4th day, I received one single message from him. I hope you're doing okay. If possible, I'd like to talk when you're ready. No, I'm sorry. No, I messed up. Just a bland, vague line like he was texting an old coworker, not someone he nearly walked down the aisle with. I read that message in the kitchen, a glass of water in my hand, and for some reason, I laughed. A dry, empty laugh with no hint of joy. Then I flipped my phone face down on the table and left it unanswered. I didn't need an explanation anymore. I had seen everything I needed to see. The tone of that message only confirmed what I already knew. To Brandon, I was a convenient option, not someone irreplaceable. My best friend, Rachel, was the first to hear the whole story. She listened without interrupting, without rushing to judge. But when I ended with, I don't think he ever meant to hurt me, she looked me straight in the eye and said, Peyton, sometimes the thing that hurts the most is indifference. I stayed quiet, but deep down I knew she was right. 2 days later, I told Jay, a close guy friend from college. His face twisted almost instantly, and he said through gritted teeth, If a man can quietly slip back to his ex behind his fiancé's back, then he never deserved you in the first place. I felt like my heart was being wrapped in the warm blanket of an outsider's clarity. The more people I told, the clearer it became. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't blind. And I definitely wasn't weak like I'd feared. The only thing I hadn't done was block Brandon's number. Not because I was waiting for him to say anything else, I just wasn't ready to close that door completely. But that didn't last long. That night, while cleaning out my inbox, I accidentally scrolled past a sample photo from the wedding studio Brandon and I had chosen. A studio in Houston with soft golden light and a rustic backdrop. He once said it was the kind of space where he could picture me walking toward him. I stared at the picture for nearly a minute. Then, without overthinking, I long pressed on Brandon's number and selected block contact. It was a small action, but my hand trembled slightly as I did it. Not because I still had feelings, but because I knew that when you block someone, It means you're choosing to protect yourself, instead of waiting for decency from someone who no longer deserves it. A week passed since I'd blocked Brandon's number. Life didn't go back to normal, but at least it found a rhythm. I woke up earlier, walked around the lake near my house every morning, ate a proper breakfast instead of just sipping cold coffee. I started answering work emails, cleaned my apartment, even cut my hair a little shorter, as if I were shedding all traces of the future bride I used to be. I didn't expect anything anymore. Brandon was a chapter that had closed, a blurry ending but one that was painfully clear. Until one Friday afternoon, as I was folding laundry, the doorbell rang. I didn't think much of it. Maybe Rachel with fresh apple pie or an Amazon package I forgot I ordered. But when I opened the door, it felt like getting punched in the chest. Brandon. There he was, same blue shirt, a little rumpled and not a hint of remorse. In his hand, a small paper bag from the coffee shop I used to love, as if this was just a delayed casual date. Peyton? He smiled lightly. I was just passing by and thought, maybe you could use something sweet. I stared at him. What are you doing here? I thought, it was time we really talked, just you and me like we used to. I crossed my arms. You really think you still have the right to start anything with, like we used to? He hesitated but tried to keep his tone casual. I miss you, and I think we can still fix this. You know, the venue still has our date reserved, and the lavender flowers if you still want that color. I think... Stop. I cut him off, feeling the blood rush to my face. He looked at me surprised. Peyton? I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. You think you can disappear then come back like nothing happened just because you realized your ex wasn't the one? Now I'm good enough again? That's not it. Brandon stepped back, still clutching the coffee cup like it was a shield. I just panicked. Zoe's not what I want anymore. You are. I looked down at his hand. The engagement ring was still there. On his ring finger. I pointed at it. Take it off. What? The ring. Take it off. It doesn't belong to you anymore. Brandon froze, his eyes darting. But then he slowly slipped the ring off and placed it on the small table by the door. His hand trembled slightly, but I didn't care. I picked up the ring, stared at it for a long time, as if I were looking at a shadow that had lost its shape, then set it back down. Strangely calm. You said I was what you needed, I said slowly, but you never asked if I still needed you. Peyton, I'm sorry. No, you're not sorry for what you did. You're just sorry it didn't work out. His eyes widened. You don't understand? Oh, I understand, I said coldly. You wanted to make sure I was still here after you tested your past, but I'm no longer the girl who'll wait for you. Brandon bit his lip, panic starting to flicker in his eyes. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. He looked around like he was searching for something that still remained between us, but there was nothing. Just a clean, quiet, resolute apartment. A place that used to be a home. Now just a shelter for someone who realized she deserved more. Peyton, please, I can fix this. I opened the door and stepped aside. You had your chance. You chose to run. And now I choose to move forward. Alone. Brandon lingered for a few more seconds, like he couldn't believe this was really happening. But I didn't budge. In the end, he turned around and walked out without another word. When the door closed, I didn't sigh. I didn't shake. I just picked up the coffee he brought, opened the lid, poured it down the sink, and tossed the cup in the trash. Like discarding a sweet illusion long past its expiration date. 3 days after Brandon walked out of my apartment with his half-hearted apology and returned ring, I began letting myself breathe again. Not deeply, not fully, but enough to survive each morning without collapsing over a name. Saturday afternoon, Mia, one of Brandon's former co-workers and someone who'd joined our group hangouts more than once, sent a message checking in. It was short. I heard what happened. Don't know all the details, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm free this afternoon. I stared at the message for a while. Mia had always been kind, not the type to pick sides. And most importantly, she had witnessed the whole arc of my relationship with Brandon. No judgment, no prying, just presence. So I said yes. We met at a small cafe in downtown Austin. I wore no makeup, just a white t-shirt and jeans, walking in with a lighter heart than I expected. Mia was thoughtful. She didn't ask too many questions. Just shared a few work stories and mentioned the times Brandon made a fool of himself during meetings. We laughed. Slightly awkward, but genuine. There was nothing flirty, nothing inappropriate. Just a conversation between two adults, one of whom had been left in the middle of a wedding that never happened. I don't know how, but Brandon found out in less than 24 hours. Sunday evening, I was folding clothes in my bedroom when a loud knock shook the front door. My heart jumped. I opened it and Brandon barged in before I could even ask what was going on. No greeting, no explanation, he just stormed into the living room like a whirlwind. Seriously, Peyton? You went out for coffee with Mia? I couldn't move, stunned by what I'd just heard. She texted to check in. We just talked. She's one of my closest friends. Brandon's voice was rising. And you know that. I crossed my arms. So, I'm not allowed to speak to anyone who knows you? I didn't sign a post-engagement no-contact clause. He threw his car keys on the table with a loud smack. You know damn well she used to have feelings for me. You did it on purpose, didn't you? I laughed for the first time, seeing the truth I used to ignore. Brandon, if I had really done it on purpose, Mia would be in my bedroom right now, not sipping cappuccino in broad daylight. He stepped forward, eyes fixed on mine like he was waiting for me to apologize. You don't see how that's wrong? My voice turned cold. No, but you know what is wrong? You thinking you still have the right to interrogate me after what you did. He froze. I was just what? Just going back to your ex behind my back? Just vanishing for weeks without a word? Just showing up when I start moving on? I stepped closer, unafraid. You stepped back. So stay there. Brandon's face shifted, not from guilt but from a bruised ego. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low. Trust me. You have no idea what you're walking into. I pointed to the door. You're right. I had no idea who I'd chosen. But now I do. Get out of my house, Brandon. He didn't move. Just stared at me, eyes blazing, jaw tight. Then, without another word, he walked out and slammed the door behind him, like he was the one who'd been betrayed. I remained still in the quiet of my living room, fully aware he could throw all the threats he wanted. But the power over my emotions, from now on, no longer belonged to him. Thought after that confrontation Brandon would disappear for good like he had before. But I underestimated a man who was used to manipulating people through emotion. The following week I started noticing a few strange things. One Monday morning, as I walked out of the coffee shop near my house, I saw a black pickup truck, one Brandon used to drive, parked across the street, headlights still warm. I ignored it. 3 days later, when I left the gym, I spotted a familiar figure standing at the gas station 1 block over. Hoodie pulled up, head down, but I'd recognize that posture anywhere. When I looked straight at him, he turned away. At first I didn't say anything to anyone. Partly because I wasn't sure if I was being paranoid, and partly because I was too tired to explain anything anymore. But by the 4th time, when I walked out of the grocery store and saw him standing at the far corner of the parking lot, pretending to scroll through his phone, I knew this wasn't a coincidence. That night, I sent him one message. Brandon, I know you're following me. This is your first and only warning. Do not cross the line again. No reply. But the next day, the pickup truck was gone. No one showed up near my home again. No shadow behind the trees across from my bedroom window when I closed the curtains at night. I didn't know if he disappeared because he was afraid of me, or because he finally realized what he'd lost. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. A few weeks later, Mia texted again, asking if I wanted to grab a drink. I thanked her but politely declined. I no longer felt guarded, but I also wasn't interested in anything connected to Brandon's past. Mia might be a good person, but I wasn't ready to step into anything that would make me second guess again. Instead, I started focusing on myself, on everything I had missed during the 3 blind years spent building a future that the other person never truly wanted to be part of. I signed up for an evening art class. something I'd always said I'd do but kept putting off for wedding planning. I repainted my living room walls, switching from pale cream to olive green, not for feng shui but because it made my mornings feel lighter. I stopped explaining what had happened. No more dodging with coworkers, no more lowering my head when someone asked why the wedding didn't happen. I simply said, I chose myself. And I truly meant it. Not because I was completely strong, not because I wasn't still sad, but because I no longer let that sadness lead the way. Brandon had once been a dream, a beautiful vision I helped build with all my heart, but a dream without trust is just an illusion. And I had woken up. That day, sitting by the window as the sunlight angled through the glass, I felt weightless. Not because everything was okay again, but because I knew I was no longer anyone's second choice. Peyton's story isn't just about a broken engagement. It's about the awakening of a woman who finally saw her own worth. In real life, many people have unknowingly played the role of someone's backup plan. But like Peyton, we have the right to say enough. We have the right to walk away when we're not being respected. Because real love doesn't come from those who hesitate. It comes from those who offer respect, clarity, and sincerity. Everyone deserves to be a priority, not an afterthought. What do you think about Peyton's decision? Should she have forgiven him or was walking away the right call? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life family stories in upcoming videos.